Greetings of the new year everyone, and welcome to another tenses video. Now it's the start of a new year, so I thought why not begin with a refresher on all the tenses compressed into a little video. Now before we get into things, I'd like to put up a sort of a disclaimer over here, which is that this is not an in-depth video. On the contrary, this is an overview video wherein we take one sentence, turn it into all the 12 tenses, and as we do so, we talk about the uses and the critical comparison between confusing tenses to increase the level of understanding. If you would, however, love to go into the detail, then I have ensured to drop the link of the tenses playlist in the description box once you're through with the video, or if you'd like to go into detail before the video, you can go ahead and click on the same. So for now, let's kickstart things. Let's begin with tense number 1, the simple present tense. So we start off with a very simple sentence in the present simple that reads, I eat. This brings me right away to the form of sentences in the present simple, and the rules are as thus. So in case your subject is any out of I, you, we, or they, things are rather simple. You follow this subject up quite simply by the verb in its base or root or infinitive form, or in other words, in the first form, and you saw that happening exactly over here. I eat, eat being the first form of the verb. However, things to complicate themselves ever so slightly in case of the subject being any out of he, she, or it. In such a case, you're going to have to follow the rules of the verb endings, which are as thus. Rule number 1, which is that in most of the cases, let's say about 80 to 85% of the verbs, and this is just an approximation, so in most of the cases, your verb will quite simply take an S towards the end, in case of he, she, it. For example, I eat, but he eats. Coming to the second rule of the verb endings, in such a case, let's say if you have any of these verb endings to your original verb, your original verb ends with either a double S, a CH, SH, X, or O. Such verbs will take towards the end the addition of an ES instead of a simple S. Then coming to the final rule of the verb endings, let's say your original verb has the second last letter as a consonant, which is then immediately followed by a Y towards an end. In such a case, in case of he, she, it, you're going to remove that Y and suffix that verb towards the end with an IES. Taking a quick example, you have the verb study. You have D as the second last letter, which is a consonant, and that's immediately followed by a Y. So in case of he, she, it, you're going to remove that Y and add IES, giving you I study, but he studies. So that's about all the verb endings. Now quickly go to the use of the present simple tense. So speaking quickly about the uses of the present simple, as most of you are already aware that the simple present is used to talk about permanent situations. For example, universal truths, facts, opinions, likes and dislikes, thoughts, and repeated actions. So all of these are more or less permanent in nature and rightly expressed in the present simple. Even in our example, we had the sentence as I eat. So this is a sentence or a statement by anyone that to mean that I am a living being, and in order to survive, I have to consume food, and that is rightly expressed in the present simple as I eat. So this is a permanent truth about the living beings, and you have that expressed as I eat in the present simple. So that was, in a crux, the use of the present simple about the permanent situations. Let's quickly move ahead to the more temporary tense, that's the present continuous tense. Coming to the present continuous tense, let's have our sentence which reads, I am eating, and this brings me right away to the form of the sentences in the present continuous. So in case of I, you're going to follow that up with the form of be, that is am. So I am. If you have you, we, or they, you're going to follow that up with an are. And in case you've got he, she, or it, that's going to follow up with the form of be, that is. I am, you, we, they are, and he, she, it is. And all these are going to be followed by the verb in the present participle form or the verb in the ing form. So that's about the form of the present continuous. Let's go ahead to the use. Speaking of the uses of the present continuous, now of course you know that the chief use of the tense is to talk about activities or actions that are in progress now or at the present moment. And that's exactly what we saw in our example, which read, I am eating. So over here, this is to say that the person is consuming the food right now or at the present moment. And since this is going to come to a halt very soon, this is a temporary activity and hence expressed in the present continuous as I am eating. Another use of the present continuous is to talk about actions or activities that are in progress around now. When I say around now, I mean not necessarily at the present moment, but in the days and the time surrounding that present moment. Let's take an example. What are you doing nowadays? So nowadays hints that it's not the present moment, but the time surrounding the present moment. You can have another example. I am learning French nowadays. So you have learning as the ing verb over there, and nowadays, or you can even have that as I am learning French these days, and that's also telling about what the action or the activity is that is in progress, not now, even now, but around now as well. That's the second use. And then the final use, or rather one of the chief uses, you can also use the present continuous to talk about events that are going to take place in the near future. You often have yourself saying, I am leaving for London tomorrow. So although it's a near future event, but how is it expressed? It is expressed in the present continuous as leaving tomorrow. Another one, my cousin is visiting me next week. Again, a near future event, but you have visiting over there as the present continuous. So that's another very useful utilization of the present continuous to talk about events in the near future. So that's about the chief uses of the present continuous. We move on ahead with our schedule, in which we have the present perfect tense coming up. Let's go. Coming to the present perfect, we have the example or the same sentence, this time turning into I have eaten. Getting quickly to the form of the sentences in the present perfect. So in case of I, you, we, or they, you're going to follow these up with the auxiliary verb have in the sentence, which will be then followed by the verb in the third form or in the past participle form as I have eaten. However, if your subject is any out of he, she, it, this time you're going to follow those up with the auxiliary verb has, and that's once again going to be followed by the verb in the third form or the past participle as he has eaten. So that's about the form. Let's get quickly to the chief use of the present perfect. So speaking vis-a-vis the chief use of the present perfect, you use the tense whenever you wish to talk about the past and the present together. I know that doesn't really help. In other words, whenever you wish to speak of a finished activity in the past, or quite simply speaking of a past activity, keeping in mind at the same time its result or effect in the present, you express the same using the present perfect tense. Or in other words, in fact, if any past activity or action finished in the past has some effect or result in the present, you express the same using the present perfect tense. Let's take some examples to make this even clearer. So let's say you are at a party and the host of the party comes over to you to invite you politely for eating. And he says that, please come, let's eat. To which you politely respond, no thank you, I have eaten. Now, why did you use the present perfect I have eaten instead of the simple past as I ate? And the reason for that is that when you respond as I have eaten, you say this bearing in mind the present result or the result in the present of that eating in the past, which is that you have no more appetite or you have no more hunger left. So essentially, when you say I have eaten, in your mind, what you're trying to say completely is, or what is implied rather, is that I have eaten and as a result, I have no more appetite left and hence I cannot eat anymore. And that's why not the simple past I ate, but I have eaten, because that activity of eating in the past is linked to the present with its effect of losing the hunger. Let's take another example. For our second example, let's say a friend of yours invites you to watch a movie and she says that, would you like to watch this movie with me? To which you respond, no, I have already seen it. So why did you say I have seen it and not the simple past I saw it? The reason for that once again when you respond as I have seen it, you are keeping in mind the impact of that past viewing of the movie, which is carried on into the present, and the impact is that you already know the story or the plot of the movie, which is why you wouldn't want to watch it again. So when you say I have seen it, essentially what you're completely implying in your mind is that you have already seen it, and hence the impact, you know the plot of the story, which is why you will not or you would not like to watch it again. And you did not use the simple past over here as I saw the movie, because this only serves to provide information that you have seen the movie, but it has no connection with the present. However, in our scenario, we did want to establish that connection of the past activity with the present, and hence the present perfect. We'll get to these differences a bit more once we reach number 5, which is the simple past. For now, we proceed ahead to the fourth tense, which is the present perfect continuous. Let's go. We arrive at the present perfect continuous. So our same sentence in the present perfect continuous changes to I have been eating, which brings me to the form of the tense. So in case your subject is any out of I, you, we, or they, in such a case you will have that followed by the auxiliary verb have, followed by been, followed by the verb in the present participle or in the verb plus ing form. However, if your subject is any out of he, she, it, in that case your auxiliary verb changes to has, followed by been, followed by, once again, the verb in the ing form as he has been eating or she has been eating, and so on. So that's about the form. Let's quickly go to the chief use of the present perfect continuous. Now, the present perfect continuous does have its fair share of usages. However, in this video, we limit ourselves to the main usage, which many of you may already be aware of, and the usage is to talk about events that started in the past and are still in progress. So, when I say I have been eating, what I imply over here is that I started eating some time ago in the past and I am still eating at the present moment, and the same expressed in the present perfect continuous as I have been eating. Let's understand that better by expanding this idea into an example. So let's say a friend comes over and says, "What's up?" And you tell them, "Well, I've been eating this large pizza for the last 10 minutes and I'm yet not through with it." And that's to say that I started eating this large pizza 10 minutes ago. I am still eating it. I'm still not through with it. And that's why the same expressed as I have been eating this large pizza. And that's your present perfect continuous in action. So that's about the chief use of the present perfect continuous. Let's go ahead and draw some rather crucial or important comparisons. Let's go. So our first important comparison is between the present perfect continuous and the simple present continuous. And the difference is thus that in case of the present continuous, we are only interested in the ongoing activity at the moment. This tense allows you no provision to connect the presently ongoing activity with the moment in the past when the activity began. So I would not do well to go ahead and use a sentence such as I am eating this pizza for the last 10 minutes. So you see, you can't actually mention the moment in the past when the pizza eating began. That was 10 minutes ago. You'd be better off to employ the present perfect continuous in such a case and have the same sentence as I have been eating this pizza for the last 10 minutes. Now you have the activity ongoing at the moment, and you also mention when it started, which was 10 minutes ago. And the right way to do this is the present perfect continuous and not the simple present continuous. That's comparison number 1. Let's check out comparison number 2. So for our second comparison, we have it between the present perfect continuous and the present perfect. So you're going to prefer yourself the present perfect continuous for shorter, more short-lived or temporary sounding activities. For example, as already used, I have been eating this pizza for the last 10 minutes. On the other hand, for activities that are more longer lasting and seem more or less permanent, which started long ago in the past and are perhaps still in progress, you're going to change your preference from the present perfect continuous to the present perfect. For instance, I have eaten only vegetarian meals all my life. So you see that stark contrast between the two. I have been eating the pizza for the past 10 minutes versus I have eaten vegetarian meals all my life. That's the present perfect. Another example quickly, let's say she has been teaching the English class for the last 1 hour. So that's a short-lived temporary activity, present perfect continuous. On the other hand, she has taught at this school for the last 10 years. So in this case, an activity started long ago in the past is perhaps still in progress. You've got yourself the present perfect. A quick final example. So I have been living in the hills for the past 2 months versus I have lived in the hills for the last 10 years. So in the second case, it's a much longer lasting, permanent seeming situation. You've got the present perfect. However, in the former case, it was just the last 2 months and you give that the present perfect continuous treatment. So in case, whenever you are confronted with the conundrum where both seem equally likely, which is to say that you feel present perfect continuous or simple or present perfect, both could work, ask yourself the situation, which is the more temporary, short-lived action, present perfect continuous, which is the more permanent sounding, longer lasting action, and that's your present perfect. So those were the important comparisons in there. We move on to our next tense on the list, and that is the simple past. Let's go. Coming to the simple past, this time our same sentence turns into I ate. So this brings me to the form, which is rather simple in case of the simple past, and that is that whatever be your personal pronoun or the subject in case of the simple past, be it I, you, we, they, he, she, or it, you follow that up with the verb in the simple past or the second form. And you saw the same happening over here. I ate. You've got ate, which is the simple past form of the original verb eat. So that's about the form quite simply. We move on to the chief uses of the simple past. So the first one, pretty easy, as almost everybody would know, that we use the simple past to talk about events that started at a moment in the past and also ended at another moment in the past. A quick example coming up. So let's say a friend asks that, did you eat well at the birthday party yesterday? To which the response, oh yes, in fact, I ate quite a bit. So the birthday party started yesterday and also ended yesterday. So we have that response in the simple past as I ate quite a bit. Coming to the second use, so you also use the simple past along with the expression used to talk about past habits or also actions that were repeated in the past on a regular basis. So let's talk about an example for the past habits with used to. So you can have a sentence such as, when I was young, I used to run 5 miles every day. And that's to say that when I was young, I would run 5 miles daily. So that's a habit that somebody's telling in which they used to follow in their younger days. Coming to another example, like I said, repeated actions in the past. So you can have another example over here that every year the neighborhood used to celebrate Diwali together. So that's a repeated action every year. And that goes on to say that in the past, every year the entire neighborhood would celebrate Diwali together. So that's the second use. So 2 uses chiefly for actions that started in the past and ended in the past. That's the first use for the past simple. And the second one for past habits and actions that repeated themselves in the past. And now on to an important comparison. So our comparison over here is one between the simple past and the present perfect. And since this is a very common source of confusion for many users, let's try and lift that fog right away. So when you express a past event using the past simple, you do it solely with the intention of just providing details or information about that event from the past. In no way do you try to connect that past with the present. That is to say, in no way do you try to indicate the results or the outcome or the effects that past activity has on your present, which is, however, the case in the present perfect. So going back to that previous example, we said that I ate quite a bit actually. So in this case, you only provided details of what you did at that birthday party yesterday. In no way are you trying to relate the impact or the effects that eating quite a bit is having on your body at the moment. However, the same sentence in the present perfect would be, I have eaten quite a bit. Now, this time you are bearing in mind, or you are hinting at the impact that eating quite a bit in the recent past is having on your body at the moment. Let's express that with an example. Let's understand that, in fact, with a quick example. So let's say somebody asks, you look sick. To which you respond, yes, actually, I have eaten quite a bit. So in this case, you are actually hinting at that impact that eating quite a bit in the recent past is having on your body now. And that's to say that, once again, when you say, I have eaten quite a bit, in your mind, your complete meaning, which is implied, is that, yes, I have eaten quite a bit, which is why I am feeling sick now. So there's an explicit connection between the activity in the past and its impact in the present, and that's why you use the present perfect in this case as I have eaten quite a bit. So whenever there's no connection between the past and the present, you've got yourself the simple past only expressing details about the past. But when you wish to convey that there is a connection of the recently held activity or its impact is there in the present, you have the same in the present perfect tense as I have eaten quite a bit. That's the first difference. Let's move ahead to the second one. Our second difference between the two tenses involves the use of finished time expressions. Now, what are finished time expressions? These are expressions such as last year, yesterday, last week, name of a past year, and so on. So basically, any time expression that belongs to the past. And the rule is that you tend to use these finished time expressions only with the simple past and not with the present perfect. Illustrations coming up. So the first example, you have a sentence in the simple past as I went to California in 1996. So you've got that time marker from the past or the finished time expression as 1996 in the sentence in the simple past as I went to California. On the contrary, you would have the same sentence in the present perfect as I have been to California. Full stop. So you see the removal of that finished time expression 1996 in case of the present perfect. One final example. So let's say you have a sentence this time as John hurt his leg in an accident yesterday. So you've got this yesterday, a finished time expression, and the sentence rightly expressed in the simple past as John hurt his leg in an accident yesterday. On the contrary, once again coming to the present perfect, you would quite simply have that sentence rendered as John has hurt his leg in an accident. So you see the removal of the word yesterday, which was the finished time expression in case of the simple past, being absent from the sentence in the present perfect, quite simply as John has hurt his leg in an accident. So that's the second line of difference, which is that you use the finished time expressions in case of the simple past, but not along with the present perfect. So those are the critical differences between the past simple and the present perfect. We move on to our next tense, which is the past continuous. Let's go. Coming to the past continuous, we have our sentence this time as I was eating. So this brings me to the form in case of the past continuous. So if your subject is any out of I, he, she, or it, you're going to follow that up with the auxiliary verb was, and that's going to be followed by the main verb in the present participle or in the ing form. However, if your subject is any out of you, we, or they, that is going to be followed up by the auxiliary verb were and then you have eventually, of course, the main verb in the present participle or the ing form. So you have I was eating, but they were eating. So that's quite simply about the form. Let's go ahead with the chief uses of the past continuous. So speaking of the uses of the past continuous, of course, as most of you would already know, that the past continuous is chiefly used to talk about actions or events that were in progress at or around a particular time in the past. So to quote an example, you have a sentence as somebody asking that, what were you doing around 9 o'clock last night? To which you may respond as, I believe I was driving home. So you see the question and answer in the past continuous because this is pertaining to an action that was in progress around a particular time in the past. Coming to another use, the past continuous is also used to talk about background events that were in action while something else happened. In such a case, you're going to use the past continuous in conjunction with or along with the simple past. Let me quote an example for the same as well. So, as I was walking home yesterday, I met a friend. So you see, what is that background activity that was going on? That was that you were walking home yesterday. So that's expressed being the background activity in the past continuous. And what is the main activity that we're hinting at? I met a friend, and that's in the past simple. So you see, for background activities, while something else happens, you can have that in the past continuous. So that's the two chief uses of the past continuous, mainly to talk about events that were in action around a particular time in the past, and second, for mentioning the background activities. That's quite simply about the past continuous. We move on to our next tense on the list, that is the past perfect. Let's go. Coming to the past perfect, this time our sentence reads, I had eaten. So that brings me to the form, which is rather simple, that in case of the past perfect, whatever be your subject, be it any out of I, you, we, they, he, she, or it, it's going to be followed by the auxiliary verb had, and that's going to be followed by the main verb in the past participle or the third form, giving you I had eaten, you had eaten, we had eaten, all the way up to it had eaten. So that's quite simply about the form. Let's get into the concept and the chief uses of the past perfect. Let's have a look. So speaking of the chief uses or the concept of the past perfect, and this is, by the way, also going to clear up the difference between the simple past and the past perfect. Let's try to get to that. So let's imagine you have a sentence to yourself that mentions two past events that occurred in sequence one after the other. Once again, you have a sentence that talks about two actions that took place in the past in sequence one after the other. So the one that happened first or the one that happened earlier gets the past perfect treatment, whereas the one that happened later or the second in line or the event that took place afterwards gets the simple past treatment. And it is for the same reason that we also refer to the past perfect as the earlier past or the past of the past. Let's get into it a bit more with the help of a few illustrations. Let's go to some examples. So let's take ourselves a situation over here. Let's say you finished eating a meal at 8 o'clock. And then at 8:05 you told your mother about it, that you had finished eating. So as you can see, we have two past events over here that occur back to back in sequence. So what is the first event over here? The first event is, of course, finishing the meal. And the second event is telling your mother about it. Let's try to bring both these past events into one sentence. You would have that as, I told my mother that I had eaten. So I told my mother. Why told? Why the simple past? Because this is the event that was second in line that happened afterwards at 8:05, getting the simple past treatment as I told my mother. Coming to the second clause, which was in the past perfect as I had eaten. Now, why this clause in the past perfect? Because this is the action that completed earlier, even before telling your mother at 8 o'clock, which is when you finished the meal. And being the earlier action or being the past of the past, you express that in the past perfect as I had eaten. So that's the exact use of the past perfect. You use the past perfect to talk about an action that occurred even before another past action that actually happened afterwards. So that's about one use. Let's go to another use quickly. For our second use of the past perfect, the tense is also used to talk about unreal or imaginary situations, things that were wished or things that actually couldn't come true. Let's take an example, perhaps a dialogue from a romantic flick, and it would go as thus, that if I had met you earlier, comma, I would have married you. So you notice that first clause, if I had met you, that's in the past perfect because this wish actually didn't come true. It's just an imagination in this case, and the speaker is just wishing it, and hence expressed as if I had met you. That's the structure for the past perfect. And then that is followed by the perfect conditional would have to express the intended action that would have been taken had the imaginary situation come true. And that's I would have married you. So that's the second use, which is using the past perfect for unreal or imagined or imaginary situations. So two chief uses talking about the past event that occurred even before another past as past of the past, and the second one talking about unreal events. Now, before moving on to the next tense, an important note. And that important note is that often the past perfect is used rather liberally and wrongly in place of the past simple. For instance, somebody asks a question that, did you watch the movie last night? To which the response may be, yes, I had seen it. Now, I had seen it, the past perfect is not the best way to go over here for two reasons primarily. First of all, neither does the question nor the answer talk about any two past events in line one after the other, so that we may deem watching the movie as the earlier action. It is the only action in the sentence in the past which would necessitate the use of the simple past and not the past perfect. Had it been the earlier action, and then we would have had another action, another past action within the same sentence, you may have considered using the past perfect as by the time my folks arrived home, I had seen the movie. In this case, finishing watching the movie occurred before the folks arrived, and that would justify the use of the past perfect, but not in such a case. Secondly, also, you may have noticed that there is a finish time expression attached in the question, which is, did you watch the movie last night? Now, as discussed earlier, that finish time expressions are only to be used along with the simple past and not along with the perfect tenses. So you can't have, I had seen the movie last night. Of course, even that doesn't go right, because there's only, once again, only one past event in the sentence. So that's about the differences between the simple past and the past perfect, and also the concept of the past perfect. We move on ahead to the past perfect continuous. So in the past perfect continuous, our sentence turns into I had been eating. So once again, talking about the form, quite similar to the past perfect. Whatever be your subject, be it any out of I, you, we, they, he, she, it, that's going to be followed by the auxiliary verb had. You will introduce been after that, and then you're going to have the verb once again in the present participle form or the verb in the ing form, giving you sentences such as I had been eating, she had been eating, he had been eating, and all the way once again up to it had been eating. And now on to the concept and uses. Speaking of the use of the past perfect continuous, we use the tense to talk about a past event that continued up till a moment in the past that we are thinking of, or stopped slightly or shortly before it. Let's take an illustration for each. So taking the first case, wherein we use the past perfect continuous to talk about a past action that continued up till a moment in the past that you are thinking of. Let's take a sentence for the same. When I met them, they had been eating. Now, what is that moment that you were thinking of? That is when you met them. So that's expressed in the simple past. However, what is the action that continued up till that moment? That was the act of eating, and hence rightly expressed as they had been eating in the past perfect continuous. Now, you may as well have the same sentence in the past continuous also, and this is where we compare both the tenses. You can have the sentence also as when I met them, they were eating. Now, what's the difference? Although this sentence is also correct. Now, when you say when I met them, they were eating, you are only referring to that specific moment when you met them. There is no connection between what was happening before you met them. So there's no connection as in when they started eating or for how long were they eating. You are only referring in the past continuous to that particular specific moment when you met them, what was going on then and around then, as we've already discussed in the use of the past continuous. However, in case of the past perfect continuous, there is scope enough to tell that how long had that action continued from the past leading up to that moment that you were thinking of. And for the same reason, you can also express the past perfect continuous with prepositions such as since or for and adding that up with the time expression. And that's to say, let's rephrase our old sentences. You can also say that when I met them, they had been eating for 10 minutes. That's to say that when I met them, the activity that they were doing started 10 minutes ago, leading up to the moment when I met them. But if you do the same with the past continuous, that would be a wrong usage as when I met them, they were eating for 10 minutes, because that's not the right way to go. Like I said, once again, the past continuous only refers to that particular moment and the little time around it, but not to the starting point of that activity as 10 minutes ago, which is only permissible in case of the past perfect continuous. So that's the first distinction over here, that you use the past continuous only to point out an ongoing activity at a specific time in the past. But in case of the past perfect continuous, you can also talk about the time when a past activity started and leading all the way to the moment that you had in mind. We go to the second case. Coming to an example for the second use of the past perfect continuous, wherein the tense is used to talk about a past action that stopped slightly or shortly before the moment that you are thinking of. So let's take an example. You have a sentence such as, when I met her, I could tell that she had been crying. So what is that moment in time that you're thinking of? That past moment is when you met her. And what do you think had stopped happening slightly before that? That is that she had been crying. So how do you know that? Perhaps you can see some stream of dried off tears. You could see the swollen eyes and perhaps the less than wholesome mood. So you could go ahead and say that when I met her, I could tell that she had been crying. And that suggests that at the moment that I met her, I could see the signs that crying was going on sometime in the past, and it stopped shortly before I met her. You can take one more quick example. When I met John, it seemed that he had been working out. So perhaps when you met John, he was rather tired, he was sweaty, and he was perhaps panting from all the workout, like perhaps maybe I would be if I go on and on like this. So you have that as, when I met John, it seemed that he had been working out, and that tells you that when you met John, the moment in time that you're thinking of, it seemed that he started working out in the past before you met him, and that activity stopped slightly or shortly before you actually met them, that moment that you are thinking of. So those are the popular or the main uses of the past perfect continuous. With this, we move on to our next tense on the list, and that is the future tense. Let's go ahead. So starting off with the future tenses, we begin with the simple future, and that renders your same sentence as I will eat. So coming to the form, rather simple. So be it I, you, we, they, he, she, it, whatever your personal pronoun, you follow that up with this in the simple future with the auxiliary verb will, and that's followed by the main verb in the infinitive or the first form, giving you I will eat, he will eat, she will eat, and so on. Coming to the use, of course, or rather before the use, one more point about the form. So in case you have a verb following up will, of course you'll go in the regular fashion that have the verb coming immediately after will, as I will eat, I will sleep, I will run, and so on. However, things tend to change a little if you have an adjective or a noun coming up after that. So for instance, an adjective, that's to say a quality. If you have a quality coming after will, then you need to insert be between will and the quality. For example, one day your daughter will be famous. You can't go straight away. Famous over there is your adjective, so you can't just have one day your daughter will famous. Famous is not a verb that you can do, so you have that as one day your daughter will be famous. And also in case of a noun, you need to insert the same be. For example, soon she will be his wife. So wife over there is a noun, and for the same reason you need to interject that be between will and the noun wife. So that's all about the form. Coming quickly to the uses. So nothing much to share over here either. You know very well that we use the simple future to provide details or information about events that are likely to or surely going to take place in the future. For example, simple information, I will go to Delhi tomorrow. That's about information. You can also make predictions with the simple future, such as perhaps it will rain tomorrow, or another prediction, perhaps the home team will win. So that's quite simply about the simple future, quite easy to follow. So with that, we move along to the next tense on the list, that is the future continuous. Let's go. So speaking of the use of the future continuous, so just like the present continuous expresses an action or an event that is in progress now or at a time around now, the past continuous talks about a past action that was in progress at a time or around a time in the past. Likewise, the future continuous is also used to express an action or an event that's going to be in progress at or around a time in the future or in the near future. For instance, let's say at 11 a.m. today, somebody says that by this time tomorrow, I will be driving my new car. So that's to say that the individual in question who is speaking, by 11 o'clock tomorrow, they will be in possession of a new car and they would be driving it, and the same expressed as by this time tomorrow, I will be driving my new car. So that's really all about the future continuous. We go on to the second last tense on the list, and that is the future perfect. Let's go. Moving ahead in the future tense, we come to the future perfect, and we have the sentence this time as I will have eaten. So let's talk quickly about the form. You've got any of your personal pronouns, the subjects I, you, we, they, he, she, it. You're going to follow that up with will, that's for the future. Then being future perfect, we introduce the perfect element, that's the auxiliary verb have over there, and that's followed by your main verb in the past participle or the third form, as you can see over here, eaten. So you have sentences such as I will have eaten, she will have eaten, he will have eaten, and the list goes on. So that's about the form. Let's quickly go to the main use. So speaking of the chief use of the future perfect, we use this tense to talk about a future event that will be over or finished by a particular moment in the future. Let's take an example right away. So let's say it's 3 o'clock right now, and somebody says that by this time tomorrow, I will have arrived in Paris. So this is a situation wherein the scheduled departure, or rather the arrival, my apologies, the scheduled arrival of the person's flight in Paris is 3 o'clock tomorrow, and they know that they will have arrived, or their arrival will be complete in Paris by 3 o'clock tomorrow. They express the same as by 3 o'clock tomorrow, I will have arrived in Paris. So that's all about the future perfect, really. We move on to our final tense, tense number 12, that is the future perfect continuous. Let's go. And we finally come to our last tense. Phew. Cheers to that, which is of course the future perfect continuous. Let's go to the form. You have the sentence this time as I will have been eating, discussing the form of course. So I, you, we, they, he, she, it. Follow that up with will and bring in the perfect have over there. Follow that up this time with been, and then you bring in your main verb in the present participle or ing form, giving you I will have been eating, they will have been eating, and the list goes on. Let's go to the use. So coming to the use of the future perfect continuous, we use the tense to talk about a future event or activity that will begin at a time in the future and will continue up till another moment or time in the future that we mention or talk about in the sentence. Let's go to an example right away. So taking an example for the future perfect continuous, let's say it's 9 o'clock in the evening right now, and someone has an invitation for a wedding dinner for 8:30 tomorrow evening. So from 8:30 till 9, if somebody goes on eating, that's going to be half an hour. So what does the person say for tomorrow? They go ahead and say that by this time tomorrow evening, I will have been eating at the wedding for half an hour. So that's to express that I will start eating at 8:30 tomorrow, that's the future. I will go on eating till 9 o'clock, that's again in the future. And you have that expressed, both moments in the future will be in progress. So you have the future perfect continuous as tomorrow by this time I will have been eating at the wedding for half an hour. So that's about the use. Now at this juncture, I feel it necessary to draw a comparison between two tenses, namely the future continuous and the future perfect continuous. And I'm going to take it nice and easy with the help of an example. So let's say right now is Saturday, 8:45 p.m. and someone has been invited for a wedding dinner that's for tomorrow evening, Sunday, 8:30 p.m. So once again, right now, Saturday, 8:45 p.m., the invitation for tomorrow evening, that is Sunday, 8:30 p.m. So right now, at 8:45 Saturday, the person who has been invited for the dinner tomorrow looks at the watch and says that by this time tomorrow, I will be eating at the wedding. So since this is the future continuous, it only pinpoints to a particular time in the future, and that's the exact same time which is on the watch right now, because by this time tomorrow, so in this case with the future continuous, the speaker is referring to 8:45 Sunday evening, that's tomorrow. However, in case of the future perfect continuous, let's say again at Saturday 8:45, the same speaker says that tomorrow by this time I will have been eating at the wedding. Now this does not particularly pinpoint to 8:45 p.m. On the contrary, this suggests that by tomorrow 8:45 p.m. I will be in the middle of my meal, and that by 8:45 I would have already started and I would have been eating for 15 minutes. So that's the precise difference over here. In case of the future continuous, we only pinpoint to that specific time, particular time in the future. Whereas the present perfect, the future perfect continuous, the future perfect continuous helps you establish the fact that you would be already in the middle of an activity and you would have already started it even before the time that you are thinking of. And that time in this case would be 15 minutes. Because let's rephrase our sentence. The wedding dinner was to start at 8:30 in the evening. We were thinking of 8:45. So to complete that future perfect tense, we can have the sentence as that tomorrow by this time I will have been eating at the wedding for 15 minutes. So particular future moment with the future continuous, and how long, or the duration as well, along with the future perfect continuous. And it also helps you establish that you will be already in the middle of that activity in the future. So that's about the final tense. Alright, so if you've come thus far in the video, I'd like to heartily congratulate you, because you are a true and dedicated language lover and learner. I hope you found the last 50 minutes worthy of your time. Would love to get your reactions on the same. And before leaving, once again, I'd like to wish a very hearty and happy new year to all the language lovers out there. May we all grow tremendously in language in the new year, that is 2020. Cheers to that, and see you soon.